Sue. Sue is our regional WASH advisor with us, and I'd like her to start it off by just giving her a short few words, then we'll invite David to take over. Please mute your mics wherever you are. So I'll hand over to Sue now to start it off.
Thank you, Ben, and good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, colleagues, I think, depending where people are dialing in from. And a big thank you to David, who has been doing a lot of work with us to put this package together, and also with colleagues in Ethiopia and Mozambique. Just would like to acknowledge your participation today and the work that you've put into not just the presentations, but also obviously how you're positioning the enabling environment in your countries. This is important for us, not least because we've been looking at aspects of the enabling environment this year as we've been on missions in your countries. But as we look forward to the next period where we have new CPD processes in countries, lots of strategic moments of reflection, without gaps, this has been one area where we recognise that we need to do more work, not least looking to see how our downstream service delivery work is being reflected at the national level, and how our downstream work is being impacted either positively or negatively by the actions that we are able to take as UNICEF within the enabling environment. So this is very important to us. We're delighted as well that David is committed from WASH PD to be supporting the region, not just in this webinar, but as we move forward into 2018. So I understand that we're going to be looking at the actual packages and materials, but then also looking to see how different countries are positioning themselves in the enabling environments, whether it be the One WASH in Ethiopia or the budgeting and financial resource mobilization and assistance to governments in Mozambique. So I'm interested, as you are, to see how this is taken forward, and we'll be following up country by country with your rolling work plans for next year, but also in the technical support that we will be continuing to provide. I think I'm handing back over to Ben or to David. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. And David, please take over.
Okay, thank you very much, Bernard and Sue. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Yeah. Bernard, next slide, please. As Sue rightly noted, this presentation is to give you an overview of the enabling environment work that we've been doing. And most of you are already familiar with what we are going to share, but what I'm going to share with you today is just an overview of the package. We will not go into the details of it. As Sue rightly noted, next year, countries will have the opportunity to do deep dives into specific functions. So today's presentation, this is the outline, as you can see from the slide. First, I'll run through what exactly we mean by enabling environment and what that means for UNICEF. And then I will look at the links between enabling environment for WASH and the SDGs, and move on to how the collaborative behaviors, SWA collaborative behaviors, and then the building blocks, as well as the UNICEF's enabling environment for WASH are aligned. This alignment is very, very important for our work, how we position UNICEF's EE work within the broader sector and then the SDG agenda. And then we'll look at the package that we've developed in terms of the guidance note, the resource platform, and other social interaction resources that are available for staff. And then we'll move on to the next steps and what the findings or recommendations that came from the global meeting we had in May this year with sector partners, and also what UNICEF we're looking forward to doing in the next 4 years. And at the end, country experiences, we'll have the opportunity to hear from Ethiopia and Mozambique in terms of what they are doing with regards to moving forward, enabling environment work. Next slide, please. Okay. Enabling environment, what does it really mean? And sometimes, you know, it's a broad area of work that encompasses everything that we do essentially. So some of the key tasks or interventions that or words that are used to describe the enabling environment are, for example, it's the supportive work that we do, system strengthening, and sometimes also upstream or reform interventions that we undertake to help government, and not to talk about the work we do with sustainable sanitation and water for all leadership activities at the country level. So sometimes it becomes confusing in terms of what exactly we mean by enabling environment. So next slide. So what we have, next slide, please. So what we have agreed to help us be on the same page or define what exactly we want to do with regards to supporting governments to advance this cause is to coin this definition for enabling environment, that it is a set of interrelated sector functions that impact the capacity of government and sector partners to engage in scalable and sustainable WASH services for all. So the key here words there are the interactions between the different functions that the sector performs and how that leads to long-term sustainable water services for everybody. So that's the definition that is guiding the work that we do, and what we intend to achieve with this definition, or the overall outcome, is for government to be empowered to be able to undertake the activities at all levels to be able to provide sustainable WASH services. So this is the fundamental or the core of what we are trying to achieve in terms of the different actions we undertake. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what does this really mean for the SDGs in terms of strengthening enabling environment? I guess you're all aware of the means of implementation of the SDGs, which clearly talks about the different areas of work that we'll have to do to be able to achieve universal access for all. The area of financing is something that has been highlighted, that we need to do more in terms of how we finance WASH services, and not to talk about the need for new technologies that will help us provide interventions that can withstand different climatic conditions and strengthen government capacity at all levels to be able to undertake their functions and also processes, put in place processes that will help them be more accountable. Yeah, so these are the different areas that we will have to do some extra work if we are determined as a sector to achieve our goal 6 by 2030. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there are two different angles to this. One is looking at interventions that are non-financial related and also financial related. So this slide presents the different actions or different areas of work that are not directly related to financial means. If you and there are two different strands of it. Our interventions in terms of climate change related activities on the left hand side, and technology and how that translates into the different mechanisms at national policy level and also at sub-national plans and actions. And on the right, in terms of the different dialogues and agreements that we have with government counterparts, and also making sure that we have systems and processes in place to monitor our interventions at national and sub-national level. And as we've been doing, and a good example is what Sam is doing in Ethiopia, trying to draw on South-South collaboration to advance or to learn from other countries. Yeah, so this slide shows the different ways of the financial means or the financial areas of advancing and enabling environment work. We have the public funds and then both at global level and national level, and also private funds, how to sort of leverage private funds to provide services. I must say that is an area that is coming up that will have to do more work because of the decline in donor funding for the sector, and also making sure that we help national governments to better plan or budget for the sector. Next, please. Yeah. So in terms of the SWA building blocks, the sanitation for water building blocks. Now we've looked at the SDGs, how enabling environment means for what it means for the SDGs and how we can operationalize that. And as you're all aware, you're all familiar with the collaborative behaviors that will have to support governments to undertake or use that as a benchmark for their work. One, it's enhancing leadership, making sure that the government has leadership for the sector in terms when it comes to planning. And these are behaviors that will have to be exhibited at all levels. The second one is making sure that there are systems in country for the sector to function properly. And then the third one is to ensure mutual accountability. We need to hold ourselves or make sure there are systems in place for the government and sector partners to hold ourselves accountable for our interventions at all levels. And then financing, again, is something that we'll have to work together, make sure we build the momentum to be able to leverage or tap into whatever financial means that are there for us to be able to achieve our goals in country. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the collaborative behaviors, one thing that all sector partners, based on the meetings and then the interactions that we've had so far on EE, is to present the alignment between the collaborative behaviors, the building blocks, and then the enabling environment package. So sector partners, they might come out with different approach to how they look at their enabling environment functions. But then that alignment with the SWA building blocks as well as the collaborative behaviors have to be very clear so that we'll be able to benchmark our intervention irrespective of what agencies are doing. So these are the building blocks for SWA, and as you're all familiar with them, they are 5 of 5. But then UNICEF, if you look at the small one, we have unpacked the institutional arrangement into 3 main components. We have the sector coordination, service delivery, and regulation and accountability. Why we did this? Because UNICEF, the work that we've been doing, we've done a lot of work on sector coordination and also service delivery arrangement. So to bring all those into play and make sure that all our tools and resources and with the good work that colleagues are doing in country are well reflected and articulated in our work. That's why we had to subdivide them under the institutional arrangement, but at the same time creating the alignment with the broader sector work. And for sector financing, we have budgeting. And I know ESAR, a lot of countries are supporting governments in terms of budget reviews and financing, tapping into domestic resources and also financial institutions in terms of what they have to offer for the sector is also now picking up. The fourth component is sector planning, monitoring, and review, which we have sort of subdivided into planning, sector planning, and then combine monitoring and evaluation and learning as one function. And finally, sector capacity development, which is the same for all our sector partners. Next, so how do we sort of reflect the building blocks in our work? And if you look at this slide sort of positions the enabling environment as one of the programming strategies on the left-hand side from my side. So it's key to delivering the different program areas that we undertake, be it rural water supply, urban water supply, washing schools. System strengthening or enabling environments is one of the pillars that we will have to program to be able to achieve that if we really want to advance our results. So we can't implement, or I mean, it's encouraged that what countries are doing in the area of water supply or any resource area should also include the different actions that we intend to undertake in the enabling environment arena. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this sort of highlights where it's positioned. So what exactly is the framework that guides all our activities that we will have to reference? This slide, I think most of you are familiar with this. I wouldn't go into details, but the key thing here is the enabling environment work or the functions. It sits within the broader institutional factors. What that means is they have conditions and processes that are beyond the control of the sector that influences our work. For example, government budget allocations and government development agenda, and all those things are much broader issues that the sector work will have to be aligned to. And then the more structural factors that are more of demographic and other economic related issues that are difficult to influence, and we will have to consider them as part of our programming activities. And most importantly, the need for political leadership in whatever we do to be able to achieve results. So these 4 or 3 different external actions or situations have significant impact on what we do in strengthening enabling environment for WASH. Next, please. Yes, so this slide presents the link in terms of how we reflect the theory of change for enabling environment. And you will note that all the functions that we just looked at are all under outputs. So that's where, so it depends on which of the outputs that you think will be able to drive significant change in your country. And that's where you need to focus your resources on and your capacity so that you'll be able to make a change in the area of service provision. There are a couple of assumptions and risks that are associated with this theory that we need to always consider. It doesn't look very visible, but I think one of the key things is making sure we have government buy-in, because without government buy-in, whatever we do will not be able to sit within the broader national development agenda. Next slide, please. Yeah, so countries, this sort of puts the different work that all countries are doing into context. We have some countries that are actually experiencing emergencies. Some countries have low capacity and other countries have high capacity. So the work that will be done on enabling environment depends on the capacity, the context in which this is happening. So if you have an emergency or working in an emergency context, of course, I mean, the focus will be on life savings and direct results, but trying to set the tone for enabling environment. But then compare
Did we lose David, or is it from my side? Okay, I think we've lost David. I hope you can hear me. David is typing, so let's see what he types.
Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can, so you can continue. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I was saying that countries will have to look at where they are in terms of their context to be able to decide how they approach enabling environment work. countries with high capacity will definitely have to focus more on enabling environment, but then countries where there's less capacity or experience in emergency, with that, I mean, some enabling environment will be done, but then the focus will be mainly on service delivery, direct service delivery. I hope you can hear me now. Everything is clear.
Yes, David, you can proceed. We can hear you.
Okay, great. So next slide, please. Yeah, so in terms of process, how do we undertake enabling environment work in country? So that's also one thing. Here, I mean, the first step is to make sure we have consensus in terms of what exactly is the priority area of work that will drive change. And in most cases, this is done through the consultations that countries undertake, sector review programs, or joint sector review activities to be able to decide what exactly is the key issue that we'll have to undertake. So that's the first step that will have to be done. And at the second step, that's where we use our washback tool as an analytical tool to be able to identify what are the bottlenecks within the sector or the gaps that are hindering sustainable services delivery. And so that will sort of give you different options, and then you prioritize, as we all know, and then focus on the key ones to develop your sector plan. And after you've developed your sector plan, the next stage is all sort of linked to that. It's the investment plan for the specific agreed function or building blocks that you intend to work on. In most cases, the investment plan includes other functions or building blocks as well, but highlighting what exactly the country will be doing to advance enabling environment, so it has to come out very clear in that stage. And that's where also sector partners will also pick what exactly they will have to do, and UNICEF's contribution will also be reflected or area of work. And then the fifth step, it's more of the implementation of what we want to do as an agency, and that will fit into the broader government agenda or the sector agreed outcome. And then we monitor our activities and then move back to the same stage of consultation to see what we've done and what we need to do to improve to be able to provide sustainable services. So overall, this is the different stages of trying to strengthen enabling environment. And as you note from the guidance note, there are details in terms of what needs to be done and what benchmarks we will have to use to be able to achieve the results at every stage of our work. Next slide, please. Yes, so with this, one of the things I think we are all aware of, we try it as much as possible to deal with as a sector is the way we assess our work on enabling environment. This has been a very challenging area for all of us, all the sector partners. And in UNICEF, we've tried as much as possible to use different scales, four scales to benchmark our interventions. And we've come out with a couple of indicators that we have as part of our RAM package that is online, that gives you an idea of concrete or tangible output for all the functions that countries or sector partners using this will have to benchmark themselves to see where they are, and then try and plan for the next step they would like to reach. The first one is, I mean, the stage of being weak, and these have got clear tangible benchmarks, and then the next enabling, and what we all aspire to reach or achieve, it's making sure that we are championing enabling environment in the countries or the communities that we work. On the left, it's an example of a question that sort of helps us to decide which scale we should self-assess ourselves, and then plan for where we want to reach in terms of what our work are. Next slide. And this guidance note is online. I've just shown the mark, so you can go there and have a look at it. We just reviewed it with center to regional office and also with country offices. So hopefully we'll have a revised version early next year, but we don't expect major change. Yeah. This slide presents the different resources that we have. Just a step back, please. Yeah, this is the different resources that we have, and I think most of you are familiar with them. We have the guidance note, and then we also have a community of practice. I am a group with over 700 members. And then the main resource platform where we've tried as much as possible to make available the different documents and guidance information on enabling environment, what is new and what others are also doing. And then we have an online course that we encourage colleagues to enroll and take. This is open to sector partners as well, so please encourage your sector partners to try and enroll on this course, and for them to be able to have a basic overview of what exactly we're trying to achieve. Next slide, please. Yes, so this slide sort of shows you the different actors or stakeholders that we've engaged so far since we launched the Enabling Environment package, and then the number of people that have enrolled in the e-learning course, and also the number of members that we have. And you will note that we have different stakeholders or members. CWE is part of it, and then other external agencies as well. Next. Next slide. Okay. This slide sort of gives feedback that we've received from different people that have and agencies that have used the platform. So you can see we got having good feedback, even though we still have a lot to do to improve the platform. Next. Yes. Here we also show you the different resources that are linked to enabling environment that we try to create the alignment. One is the WASH part, which all of you are familiar with, and then also our WASH strategy, as well as the resources on WASH accountability that Cecilia and the water team have developed. So we encourage colleagues to make use of these resources and try to align them or link them to the broader EE agenda in countries. Next. Yes, so what are the next steps? At the start of this, I noted we had a global meeting in May to sort of compare notes with what other agencies are doing and what exactly we need to focus on in the coming years. I think one thing that came out clear from this global meeting is to make sure that there is this alignment between the collaborative behaviors and then the building blocks, which I noted earlier on. The use of GLASS as a process to leverage our monitoring of the building blocks was clearly noted. I think we felt that GLASS, even though it has its challenges now, it will be a good process for us to use to measure and establish a good monitoring system for enabling environment. And then the joint sector reviews that we've been doing, or countries have been doing, it has a lot of potential in terms of generating data that will help country officers. It was noted that it's worth continuing with this approach and making a better use of the reviews. And lastly, the use of WASHPAD as a tool, analytical tool for determining what are the gaps or what are the bottlenecks within the sector, and then prioritizing and taking action was also noted. Next, please. Yes, so way forward, what did we decide? I mean, the recommendations that came out from we need to engage and then make sure we work together to pull out the best practice in terms of what others are doing to strengthen enabling environment. So that was something that we agreed to. And also the health sector, they started a lot of work on strengthening systems before we sort of came in. So there's a lot of learning that we'll have to draw from where they are and how they are actually doing. So that's one thing we also came up with. And then the issue of building consensus around what exactly are we trying to measure. It's something that we'll have to work on so that we don't create confusion instead of trying to reduce the confusion within the sector in terms of how we monitor our qualitative results. Domestic financing was noted that this is an area that we need to fast track our interventions if we really want to make a difference in terms of service delivery, and also coordination and collaboration with others. This area of work. It's broad. It involves all key stakeholders. So no agency can do it all. So we need to work together and make sure our ultimate goal is supporting the government to strengthen the processes and systems that they have in place. Yeah. Next. So for UNICEF, what does this mean for us? We just signed off our CPD. So first, what we try to do or plan to do is all countries that are actually going to develop their CPD and are going through the midterm review, we work to try and strengthen our enabling environment component of our work, and make sure our situation analysis clearly brings out the issues around enabling environment, and linked to that will be key actions that will help countries support governments. As part of that, we've started a pilot of developing an citizen card that will help ordinary citizens present their perception or share their perception of how the different functions are actually working or performing in countries. So that Nigeria did a pilot, and we hope to sort of scale that up to other countries as well. So our first target is ESAR project, 10 countries that we work in with different. This is one thing that we would like to sort of add to that work as well. And also, as I noted earlier, on the RAM indicators that we've developed, we intend to use that, make sure that is institutionalized, so that we'll be able to track our progress. And then, of course, maintaining the platform and translating the guidance note into different languages. Currently, we only have French for the guidance note, but we plan to do Spanish and also the e-learning materials. And at the end of it all, learn from what we've done so far and then the challenges, and come up with a new package, hopefully in 2019. So these are the plans or the actions that at the global level we intend to work with country offices and regional offices to achieve. So now I'll turn it back to, give it back to Bernard for him to share the next steps of today's sharing session. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please just type them into the chat box, and I'll be more than happy to respond to them. Bernard, over to you.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks so much for the clarity and everything. It's gone on well. So I'll hand over to Sam. Sam, please, if you may take over now as a presenter. Sam, could you come on sound, please?
Hello, Bernard, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Yeah, hi Bernard. There seems to be some technical issue with the presentation. It's not coming up on our end. Perhaps it's possible to try and reload it.
Yeah, I'll go the David way, so you may start as I work it out, and I'll be moving the slides for you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present on the Ethiopia example. And thank you, David, also for the introduction, as well as Sue. Some of the interesting points that you are raising, David, around country contexts apply very, very well to our own situation. You mentioned about some country context being related more to service delivery, where you may have a more fragile environment, and in other countries there may be a requirement to work more on the enabling environment. I guess I'm happy to say that in Ethiopian context we have to do both, because we're working in a situation where we have certain parts of the country which are very fragile, and we have also certain parts of the country where we need to be working much more in the upstream area of the enabling environment. So the presentation which I wanted to make today relates very much to the work that we have been doing on the One Wash National Programme. This is a program which was established back in 2013, and I think if you've got the slide in front of you, there are 7 main reasons why we established this program as a wash sector in Ethiopia, and they're essentially related to having a united, inclusive, comprehensive, innovative, effective and progress orientated and supportive environment for the entire wash sector. And they have some principles which were set up by all the development partners and the government, which are related to the word one, where revolving around the word one, we have established one planning system, one budgeting system, one financial management system, one procurement system, one information system, monitoring and evaluation system, and reporting system. So if you go to the next slide, Bernard, we are going to just present today on 5 areas very briefly. Firstly, a brief background to where we are as a sector, something on the One Wash creation, and particularly important for the country offices, maybe just to talk about the role that UNICEF played in Ethiopia in establishing the One Wash National Programme. And then the financing architecture and results, which are relevant today, but also within the SDGs 6.1, 6.2, looking ahead to what potential future financial tools we could use for the phase 2. So on the next slide, and I think there's still some technical problem in seeing the presentation, but I'll just sort of try to graphically explain a little bit what we have. It's a little bit of a time frame showing the evolution of the wash sector since 1998 in Ethiopia up until the present day. And during that period, there has been a number of key milestones within the enabling environment. And perhaps interesting to note is that a large number of the sort of acceleration steps towards having a more effective enabling environment have occurred during this period of lead up to the MDGs and then the post-MDGs. In the initial stages, between the sort of decade between 1998 and 2008, there were a sort of an attempt to start a universal action plan for wash services. But much of that work was focused around water supply. Very little of it in that decade between 98 and 2008 was focused around sanitation, and also at that time it was very project driven with limited interministerial collaboration. Then between 2009 and 2011, the government adopted their first 5-year plan of growth and transformation, which they call the GTP1, and in that period the first WASH implementation framework was developed, and that WASH implementation framework started to lay the foundations for the enabling environment of the One Wash National Programme, which we're now implementing. And so then in 2012 and up to 2016, the One Wash National Programme was started, and different MOUs were established, and coordination structure was put in place at the federal level and also at the regional level. So what were I think the key thing, what were the key UNICEF contributions to this particular establishment of the One Wash National Programme? The first thing I think to say is that UNICEF worked hard on putting in place the fiduciary risk assessments that were needed for the pooling of finance. the sort of fiscal tools which were available to the government were following predominantly the World Bank concessional loan financing. And there wasn't really any fiduciary risk that had been assessed for other partners who might be funding from grants, or indeed when you merge together those funds with government public resources. So the fiduciary risk assessment was undertaken by UNICEF in 2013, and when we did that, we tried to understand also what would be the potential barrier to enter for UNICEF into this kind of pool funding arrangement using our regular resources. The other key thing that UNICEF contributed to the establishment of the One Wash National Programme was actually the drafting of the One Wash National Programme document. Through a team of experts, UNICEF led the process, which was a very consultative process of designing what would be the benchmarks for the different regions and what would be the unit costs and the potential budgets that would be needed at that time to accelerate our progress to reach the MDGs. And as you may be aware, that Ethiopia achieved the water target on MDG 7C, and actually one of the major contributors to that was the final 3 years of the MDG period, where there was a massive acceleration in terms of coverage for particularly water supply. The other key thing that UNICEF did at the time was also try to establish an inventory of all the WASH assets in the country. And this national WASH inventory was initiated as a sort of census in the period of 2010 and 11, and was completed in 2013. So it took some years to do, but it visited each and every household of the country to establish the levels of sanitation coverage, and it also inventorized all the assets for water supply, both in institutions and also at the community level. To give you an idea of this, the National WASH Inventory inventorized initially about 160,000 water schemes across Ethiopia, and of course it visited around 20 million households. So it was an extremely large piece of work, which was done initially with UNICEF and World Bank support using a paper-based system. And then later on, we introduced mobile phones to do real-time data collection in the Somali region. Should I pause there, Bernard? Because I think I'm still not seeing the presentation. Is it other people seeing it?
Yeah, the people are seeing it, I think. Now we're on the next slide after you finish that.
Great. Okay. So the next slide, which is slide 4, presents the financing architecture, and it's an example of the financing architecture from 2016 of the UNICEF CPD for WASH in Ethiopia. And what we're trying to show here is the financial resource which has been allocated through attribution and that which has been allocated through contribution to 2 separate financial accounts. So as we all know, at the country office level, we work with annual work plans, and those annual work plans usually are focusing on a large percentage on service delivery, where we're measuring contribution of UNICEF financing to results. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see that in 2016, UNICEF Ethiopia spent $40 million of RR, OR, and ORE through 2 cash transfer modalities of HAC, the direct payment and reimbursement, to UNICEF annual work plans in our 8 different regional states. And those results, those finances resulted in us reaching the achieved results you can see on the slide. So about 150,000 people with water, 1.5 million people with sanitation, 8 towns, 81 schools, etc., plus the 2.3 million with WASH services in emergencies. But what's important on the slide is then to look at the other side, where we contributed $1.3 million in RR through a DCT swap to a blended financing account that we call the Consolidated WASH account, which has funds from the World Bank, African Development Bank, DFID, and Finland. And that account has a budget of $450 million, so sort of 10 times what the annual work plan is of UNICEF through the regions. And you can see very clearly that the results that we achieved, that we leveraged with our funding, was very, very high, particularly on institutional WASH, where you can see that the number of health centres and health posts that we reach with sanitation and water was more than 200, and schools was between 550 and 650 schools. So we had a much greater impact in terms of the number of the reach of our programme through placing a smaller amount of finance through that consolidated WASH account. But clearly, to blend our finances with loan and domestic financing resources in that CWA, we needed to undertake the steps I mentioned before related to the fiduciary risk to ensure that we were compliant with HACT at the country office level. So on the next slide, slide number 5. I just wanted to highlight over the last 5-year period what have been the main contributions that UNICEF has made to the UNICEF Ethiopia WASH sector, and I believe that they fall into sort of 3 areas. One on policy and sector strategy, the second on service delivery, and the third on knowledge and capacity. And I think you can read them on the slide, but just to highlight some of the key ones that we have tried to work on. In the policy arena, we have worked very strongly on trying to develop a national urban sanitation and hygiene strategy, realizing that from the WASH-BAT, again, the urban sanitation subsector was the most neglected part of the WASH sector, and that it needed an integrated strategy. And we've also worked now on a new rural water utility concept, again to try to bring in additional finance and tariff flows to the rural sector, but also to ensure greater functionality and sustainability of rural water schemes in the country. On the service delivery side, we are currently working strongly on trying to get a better understanding of the rural sanitation situation by undertaking micro-planning in all of the regions of Ethiopia, which, as you would imagine, a country of 100 million people is a big task. But we are progressing now that by the first quarter of next year, we will have detailed plans of both rural and urban, but particularly on the rural sanitation, we will have the micro plans. And we have also developed with the private sector a new concept for the private sector to be involved in operations of facilities. On the knowledge and capacity, I mentioned the WASH-BAT, but also we have undertaken an SDG costing tool to understand how much the SDGs will cost us. And if I move forward onto the next slide, slide number 7, then I will continue with some of these issues of the costings. So the sector itself, we have established a water sector working group, and that water sector working group has been in operation for 3 years. And the important thing to mention on this organogram is not all the boxes, but just to mention that given this idea of the nexus between development and emergency and the need for this new way of working, one thing we've tried to do in Ethiopia is embed the WASH cluster within the overall water sector working group. This is a means also for us to try to ensure that we are counting and reporting on the humanitarian interventions and not double counting or duplicating investments of development investments with humanitarian investments in areas of need. On slide 8, we have these regular sector events. I think Ethiopia is one of the countries in the region that has more than a decade of experience of working on joint technical reviews and undertakes multi-stakeholder forums every year, which attract more than 500 WASH professionals from both public, private sector, academia and non-government organizations. Last year was the first year that we actually were able to do a full WASH report for the sector. we were able to produce a one wash annual report, which documented all the wash activities in the country, from all the development partners, from the NGOs, from the government, and also from private sector. This for us was a very, very big achievement. On slide number 9, I just wanted to also then mention how does this translate in terms of the CPD structure for WASH, in terms of our theory of change in the country office. We've established since the last CPD, since 2013, a specific pillar of our programs, a specific output of our program, which is only related to sector coordination and enabling environment. And this is headed also by an expert and also with a team, so that we're able to dedicate enough time to this particular issue. And it's backed up by our second pillar, which is on knowledge management, where our analytical work is undertaken to also inform that area of enabling environment. So moving forward to number 11, slide number 11. This is the last slide. I just wanted to mention here that moving forward, our SDG calculation for Ethiopia indicates that we need to have a 7-fold increase in the financing to achieve the SDGs. Our annual report from last year indicated that the expenditure in the sector, for the WASH sector, Ethiopian WASH sector last year, was around $500 million. From all resources, and we'll need a 7-fold increase on that expenditure to be able to achieve the SDGs. So we're exploring how these $3 billion of a year of additional resources might be allocated. And as you can see from this diagram, we've put a lot of thought into different forms of financing, and UNICEF has been really leading this discussion in Ethiopia to try to put together different packages. The first of them really is related to the taxes, tariffs and transfers, and our work that we're doing on establishing now an independent regulator for the sector, which would enable increased domestic financing, particularly from tariffs. The second is we're exploring also the green climate funds, the climate financing, which again is expected to manage a large amount of the ODA going forward. We've also looked at the domestic commercial financing from utilities. One of the areas that we are trying to look at is to look at increasing commercial loans from local currency to the water utilities, as also as an additional injection of finance into the sector. We have the government pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, which again are being explored at the moment under the climate resilient WASH component of our One WASH program, to be used as on-lending facilities for utilities and municipalities. And then we have finally the guarantees and the public-private partnerships. The guarantees at the moment, we're exploring this for international private companies who are investing in Ethiopia through the revenue guarantee schemes, and then linking them again back to the utilities. So overall, the enabling environment component for us is an extremely important component, and as Sue said in the introduction, it's going to become even more important as we move forward. We have to balance it with our service delivery component, but we see them both being complementary in that what we learn from our service delivery is informing us in a positive way and giving us confidence at the policy table. So I'll end there. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
So thanks, Sam, and this apologies because of the technicality. There's some who are seeing the presentation, there's some who are not, but I've sent the PPT to your inbox. Now it should be there. It's a little bit heavy, but it should be there. Please, if you have any questions, keep on writing them. I know that you're running out of time, but we have one short presentation from Mozambique, so if you can bear with us. And then, so over to you, Mozambique.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Angelina. I'm here with my colleague Jesus. Just sharing.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you, yes, but now you've stopped talking, so keep talking.
Okay, but we need PPT. They need to upload, yeah?
Do you, I mean,
Can you-
it's only a couple of slides, but
If you don't mind.
if you don't mind trying to upload?
I actually, from some of us are seeing the PPT, some are not. So because of, I don't want to.
So it is the same PPT.
It's the same PPT, so you can say the first slide and then I'll be moving the slides as you talk.
Okay, thank you very much. As I was saying, I'm here with my colleague Jesus on behalf of Chris. Just a quick, let's say, sharing experience. We hope that, of course, all of you, you know Mozambique, even the country situation of microeconomical situation. But besides of that, UNICEF has been supporting the government of Mozambique, especially in that on WASH in terms of financial mobilization, using so many mechanisms. So we try to, in the first slide, to highlight some of the key that we have been working on over, let's say, maybe 10 years. One is on the, which we call the budget brief. It's a review of the budget allocations, the budget allocation, and country budget allocation. To the main objective of the developing budget brief was really to guide the parliamentarian to have a tool in terms of when they are approving the budget. And also has advocacy tool to civil society and the government. Civil society sort of can demand the allocation of enough resources for water. And for government itself has a tool to enable them to engage in dialogue with, for instance, the Minister of Finance in terms of annual budget allocation for WASH. So it's somehow worked a bit. And in the sense that slowly the Minister of Finance was, despite the limited resource that the country has, was slowly allocating some resources for the water and sanitation. And also the platform, the water and sanitation for all platform has also, let's say, strengthened in that partnership between the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Public Works and Public Work and Housing that in charge for water supply and sanitation. In the sense that the dialogue among the two was, of course, with UNICEF support, we have been engaged in that mechanism. It also allowed that the view from the Minister of Finance to water and supply components is was, and look at the different view was really improving. And at least for up to 2013-14, number of allocation has slightly increased if you compare to the previous year. Next slide. So the next slide is related to in terms of so where we are now. So despite those all efforts, hello.
Hey, come on, hey, no.
Can I continue? Yeah. So despite those developments, with now the SDGs, the country has developed a document in terms of how the country intends to reach the SDGs, which means in this analysis it shows that we still
I had already bypassed it.
Sorry, can I ask Astrid Banda, please? Can you switch off your mic? Astrid Banda. Astrid Banda, please switch off your mic.
They did. Yes,
Sorry. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Thanks, Astrid. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry
Yeah,
for
we
that.
did on our side here. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. So so we after that analysis in terms of reaching resources required for reaching the SDGs, it was found that at least 2.6 is missing if really the country wants to reach the SDG target by 2013. So, and I should highlight that Mozambique has been, even from long time, depending on external investment, especially for water supply and sanitation. And that situation now, it's become more increasing now with the situation that we do have in the country, the macroeconomic financing situation because of the hiding debt. So the question now is how we can get, where we are going to get that 2.6 billion that is required to reach the SDG. So one of the platform that we think, if you see the last slide, it's on the innovative financing. So it's something that we are starting, we are initiating the process, but to go more the component, the way where we are in terms of innovative financing, I will hand over to my colleague Jesus.
Okay, Ben. So I don't know if we're in the same slide actually, but we should be in the slide that has the title Mozambique BB Analysis.
Yeah.
Yes,
but just
we're in that slide. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just to recap a little bit of what Angelina was saying. So basically, Mozambique country office, UNICEF in Mozambique, has a history of analyzing budgets from the government in different sectors. That's what we call the budget briefs. And with the budget briefs, we have had a tool for advocacy. So to increase allocation of budget from government for the different sectors. And in the case of WASH, as Angelina was mentioning, the gap is very big. The gap is 2.6 billion, so where the money is coming from. And UNICEF has started to support government in identifying new ways of financing for the WASH sector. And one of the things that we are studying now, analyzing now, is the development of an impact fund, a sort of a blended funding facility that can put together funds from private investors, governments, development funding institutions, and also the traditional donors, to increase and to leverage existing funding to cover water supply services and sanitation services, especially in secondary cities, because we feel that on one side you have the urban environment, the big cities, the ones that are properly regulated, that have operators, and that are doing not so bad, I should say. On the other hand, you have the traditional rural sector that has obviously a huge gap on financing, but at least there are some streams of financing. But in the middle, you have these small towns, these secondary cities, for which the funding is very limited. So the idea of having this development impact fund at this moment is to focus on advancing on provision of WASH services for 30 secondary cities, to have a blended facility of around $120 million that can cover 500,000 beneficiaries. And as I said, we are at the moment doing a feasibility analysis that is led by government, is led by the steering committee that is composed of the sector lead, the National Directorate for Water, the administration for the water facilities and sanitation facilities in the small cities, and the water regulator, with support of the World Bank and other donors like Holland, like the Dutch, that are very much engaged in the process. So basically, UNICEF's role at this moment is to lead this analysis to see whether a funding facility, a blended facility like this one, is feasible within the Mozambican legal framework and institutional framework. And UNICEF will take the role if, when we finalize this analysis, to set up the model and to provide technical assistance for implementation, following an implementation model that we have been using for the past 5 years or more here in Mozambique, which is the model that we use for WASH in small towns. So at this point, we are very much at the development stage. We have a very strong buy-in from government. We have already discussed this with donors in country, and we would like to take a step forward when we have the analysis completed to start looking for financing windows, let's say. So far, we have identified that there is a little bit of appetite in terms of the donors that are here. Obviously, As Angelina said, the environment at the moment, the climate for financing through the government is not so great. So we're trying to also look for other avenues for investment that also include the development impact funds at the international level. We have also some discussions with the local banks. Some of them are interested, but obviously it's still a bit premature to talk about specific results. But this is the idea. This is the proposal that we have at the moment, and obviously we would like to share this as we move forward. I think we can. This is what we have to share for now. I know we are a bit concerned about the time, so over to you, Ben.
So thanks, Angeline and Jesus, for that presentation. Colleagues, I think it's time, if we have to comment anything, you can write in the chat box, or if you want to talk, the mics can be open now, but it's better you indicate that you want to talk. If you have any question, just go ahead. We can allow the next 10 minutes so that we can conclude by 25 past the hour. So please proceed. And I think there was already one or two comments. And David, do you want to start?
Okay, Bernard, there was a comment on whether the implementation of the TOC has to be linked to cost and time. And I think, yeah, initially the TOC, it's at a higher level. Of course, time and cost are good parameters that have to be clearly projected. But then what is key to getting that right, it's making sure that we flash out the assumptions that underpin the use of the TOC, and also the risk that you identify, how you intend to mitigate those risks. So those are the key things that will have to be considered if when trying to adapt the TOC to your country context for implementation.
Just to pick also up a comment written by Michele, but it's just a comment that WHO leads the regulatory framework forum, which could be an interesting opportunity for UNICEF to strengthen collaborations on regulation of WASH services. So just noting also that WHO is leading some network, and it's good to look at that as well. So Tariq, thanks for that. Any other quick one? Sam, do you want to come in? And if you have something to add and say as we try to wind up this?
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. I mean, maybe just to say, I think for all of us in the country offices, we're driven often by indicators and reports that we have to submit through RAM. And I think it's important that we have some further dialogue in the coming months, given what David has mentioned about next year, to try to look at how the actual structure of our outputs and outcomes in our CPDs can link better to enabling environment indicators and also to the SMQs that we have to report against. This would be, I think, a good incentive for us to be more transparent in terms of our accountabilities in the enabling environment, and also to encourage and initiate more dialogue with our representatives in this area. So that's just a comment from my side, which I think could be useful in the coming months and years.
Okay, yeah, and just to add to that, Bernard, this is David. Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I think we'll be having another sharing session hopefully towards the end of this year, or that's a global one, or early next year to get colleagues up to speed in terms of the changes that we've done to RAM and then the SMQs. Yeah, but just to also say that this is an opportunity for countries that are working on enabling environment at different stages to reflect, and as I noted earlier, what exactly is the plan for the government, because our overall goal is to support the government to achieve the SDGs in one way or the other. So that is a discussion that will have to inform our interventions or our consultations. So based on that, if Bernard or the Sue and HQ team are there to help with whatever technical assistant, you will need out of UNICEF to be able to drive your agenda in country. And also we can also make available to you some of the experiences that from other countries, not only within ESAR, but other regions, for you to draw some lessons. Over.
Thanks, David. And Shiva, I was actually about to give you a chance to talk rather than to read from you. So Shiva, because of your Kenyan connection, you have written something here, but a quick comment on this so that we can conclude. Shiva, if you can unmute your mic and talk.
Hi, Ben. Greetings from Ethiopia. Yes, I just like to elaborate on the comments that I mentioned. As we are talking more and more working upstream in the context of the enabling environment, it would be important to delineate water, sanitation, and institutional was, again within institutional was, the school and the health facilities, so that it can relate to the work that we are doing, and also it really gives us focus on where the real gaps are. And I think they are quite evident to really see on these 4 sub-themes that each country is on a different pace. And sometimes talking about WASH as overall masks the situation. So that's what my comment and suggestion would be to colleagues when they are formulating the indicators. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I don't see any comments here now. I would really like to thank our presenters for today. Thanks, Sam from Ethiopia. Thanks a lot, David from HQ. And thanks to Angeline and Jesus from Mozambique. We thank you for the time that you took to prepare, to present. Thanks to all the participants who've joined us today. And from the regional office, we are so grateful that we see this as a very important piece for the next, for the start of next year. That's the first half. We have to focus a lot on enabling environment, and we plan to organize some face-to-face meeting, I think somewhere in Swaziland. We have to conclude that so that we can talk to each other, more like in a workshop forum setup, so that we can see how we can push this ahead. And this is our very last webinar for this year on this series. So thanks a lot for your contributions over the year. And if I don't get another chance, then it's coming so early, but Merry Christmas to all of you. And we will see you again next year when we resume our ESAR webinar series. Thank you very much and have a good evening.